done the tournament, the 2 shows. I cornered Romero, Jazz, drove back overnight from Pennsylvania to your show, cornered DeFreitas and Bobby, and then it's like dead, like nothing, like everything. It was like the inertia of it was like running into a brick wall.
Okay. Well, let's get started. Okay, welcome to Studio 88. Today, my special guest, Rory McDonell. He's been in the fight game since 2006, probably longer. That was 2006 is when your first pro fight was.
My pro debut.
He's the owner of Parabellum, which is I like to call it like a gym hub. This is where everybody across the province come to train, and they cross-train, and you're the head coach there, along with Lucas Chaston. Is that correct?
Yes, correct. Yeah.
And then Lyndon Whitlock.
Yeah, exactly.
And then who else you got down there?
Those are the three main coaches. We also have Chris Prickett, who's he owns Niagara Top Team.
Okay.
He's an amazing wrestler, Olympic alternate, Pan American champion, national champion. He's the assistant coach at Brock, and Brock is the most dominant wrestling program probably in Canadian history. Certainly right now. And we get the benefit of him coming down to work with our guys as well. He's been, I've been friends with him since I was 13 years old. We met on a wrestling trip in Edmonton when we were out there for nationals, for like kids nationals. And we wrestled together at Guelph and kind of stayed connected, and both ended up coaching for a living. And it's funny because I remember being in university and talking to him, saying, wouldn't it be amazing if this was our job? Like we're on a wrestling trip or something, and like if we didn't have to worry about school and finding a job to pull us away from this, wouldn't it be cool if we could do this? And in a roundabout way, we both found a way to kind of live on the mat as our profession, which is kind of cool now that we're like, I'm 38 and he's 36, and this sustains both of us. So that's cool. And then Bobby, who fought for you, is a very talented, very well educated strength and conditioning coach, and I like working the fighters into the family, right? I like we're really connected, so having him teach at the gym it makes sense for everybody. He's there more. I like him. He's a good kid. He is
a great kid. He's very polite.
He is.
We're very well spoken, very professional, especially for being a young man.
Yeah.
A lot of times there's a lot of trying to groom them and making sure they babysit them a little bit.
Yeah.
He came in true professional.
You know, it's funny. So we dealt with him when he was a little bit younger.
How old is he?
Early 20s, 21, 22, I think, maybe 23. Sorry, Bobby. But I dealt with him when he was a teenager, and I remember he just didn't take it seriously. And I looked at the kid and I'm like, you're so talented. You've got all these gifts. And he just didn't. He wasn't invested in what we were doing. And I remember I gave him a hard time when he was younger, the way a coach will, like kind of busting your balls, making it a little uncomfortable. And then he went to Thunder Bay for a year and trained in an environment that wasn't the hub that you described, where you have access to 3 or 4, high quality coaches, to 20 to 30 high quality training partners that are going to be there every day. They're going to be there every single day for you to train. And he's up in Thunder Bay calling people, begging them just to come in to be a training partner. And when he came back, he got it. He got what we were trying to do. He understood the value of the program, and he was a different athlete. And since then, I've given him everything I possibly can, because I saw the shift, and that's important to me, right? Where I can see him falling in love with it, see him starting to take it seriously in a way that I want to invest in him. So that's really paid off. He's really grown over the past year or two. I mean, you saw his performance. It was that was a gritty, tough opponent that he had from Vancouver, the TriStar in Vancouver. Dennis Kang in his corner. He's a tough kid.
Yeah. Bryce Gorgon.
Yeah, I really enjoyed that fight, because that was a good, you guys do this well. It was a really well matched fight between two scrappy guys that are as gritty as they are technical. So just if I was less emotionally invested in it, I probably would have enjoyed watching it.
Yeah. So walk us back through the whole Parabellum thing. How did that gym come? How did that start? I mean, let's rewind a little bit. You've been fighting since 2006. You fought on Apex, Rec, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, Rec MMA.
And Score Fighting Series.
Exactly, yeah.
Did you own the gym back then?
No, I opened the gym.
Where did you train before?
I bounced around a lot. So I started. I wrestled all through high school and university. I started with Jeff Jocelyn in Hamilton, and I ran into a lot of the people at Jocelyn's that eventually became really fundamental to the network that I developed in the combat sports world. Guys like PJ O'Sullivan, who owns Pura BJJ, which is an amazing jiu-jitsu gym. And I went to Pura to continue to train with PJ. And while I was there, I met Josh Hill and I met Lyndon Whitlock. And we trained together at this jiu-jitsu gym with the attitude that fighters bring to the table, which is hard-nosed. There's no animosity between you, but I'm trying to beat those guys. Like on the mat, I'm trying to win, and so are they. And it developed over time a genuine respect for each other's skills and work ethic. And then I was working at a few different gyms, and you strike me as being the same type of person where I if I'm going to do this, I want to be able to design it and control it and do it the way it should be done, do it right. And we talked about that before the cameras came on. Doing things correctly is important. And I didn't like giving up some of the control about how the programs ran to the gym owners. So I made a decision very early in my coaching career that I would work towards owning a gym. So I bought, mats on Kijiji when they were reasonably priced. I'd buy heavy bags when they were on sale and just kind of store them in my parents' basement until we could make this work. And then when I opened Parabellum, I still fought for another 2 years afterwards, but I immediately got Lucas involved because I trained with him for years. I'd immediately got Lyndon involved because I really respected him. And then all the guys that I'd kind of trained with immediately said, well, we already know that there's good training partners there, so we'll come along. And that's kind of how it started as a hub, because I had already been a bit of the Ronin culture where you bounce around to different gyms just to get the best training that you can. And so it made good connections. So everybody that I trained with said, yeah, we'll just come here and keep working. And then it grew out from there.
What's the name mean?
Parabellum, I've got this will probably come up more in this discussion, but I've got a history degree and a history background in a way that still is really fundamentally connected to my life. I love reading about it and studying it, and it does impact how I interact with the world. So Parabellum is a Latin quote attributed to either a Roman general or Cicero, and it means if you wish for peace, you must prepare for war. And the idea is in a broader sense that if you are strong and you're capable and you can defend yourself against anything, it's very unlikely that anybody will attack you. That is not the type of person that people look at and say, that's a victim. So the paradox of it is the more prepared you are to fight, the less likely you will be forced to fight. And Ronald Reagan said something very similar about the United States in the 80s. He said, nobody has ever attacked the United States because we were too strong. Countries get attacked when they appear weak, when there's vulnerabilities. And so when I was opening the gym, I wanted to work with pro fighters, and that's the Parabellum part, the prepare for war. And that's what it means literally, prepare for war. We got guys like AJ, Bobby, Romero, a ton of great fighters, and we are preparing them for war. They are going into a battle and they know it, and we're getting them ready. And then we have 250 members that may never want to fight. That may be quite the opposite, that they're trying to learn how to protect themselves.
They're the ones that keep the door open.
And they are. And there's it's a different type of coaching, a different type of connection. When I'm dealing with the fighters, you're sharpening a sword, and it's a very methodical, deliberate thing. With recreational students, you're dealing with different personalities, and it can be more fun in some ways and a little less intensely focused. But the message to them is that you are preparing for war in the hopes that you never have to actually do it. But if you do, you're going to be ready. And we create confidence. And one of the things, and I said this to somebody today, actually, one of the things I'm really working for with rec students, I never want them to feel helpless in any situation, in a fight, in a self-defense situation. But that's kind of the attitude, and that comes from strength. And that's kind of where the root of the name is.
Yeah, that's really cool. Yeah, I mean, you have such a strong stable of guys. Walk me through this. You got Anthony Romero
and women. We've got
women.
Yeah.
So Anthony Romero just signed Contender Series.
Yes, sir.
So I think, is he at the same time as TJ?
I don't think so. I think that they're because they're doing it season or weekly, right? Like it's like a season. So I think they try to spread the Canadians out, but I'm not 100% sure.
And then who else do you got under there? You got Bobby Poulter.
Bobby Poulter, who fought for you. Adam DeFreitas, who also fought for you.
Yeah, he's on Saturday. He's coming in.
Oh, you've got him coming. He's an interesting guy.
He's super interesting,
and he's got like just a bunch of random things that he's really into. You could talk to him about being a prison guard and some of the self-defense work he's used, like from cage fighting, like literally, I mean, fighting against the cage to how you control a prisoner in a cell against a cage. And there's some neat stuff there. And then you get into about the reptiles and the spiders.
I'm super excited.
Like
to talk to him.
He's an interesting guy. Really talented jiu-jitsu player too. Really talented. AJ, Aaron Jeffrey, he fought on Contender Series. He's, in my mind, at 185, he belongs in the UFC. I think that's his future. And the sport is unpredictable, but assuming that things continue to look the way they look right now, I can't imagine that a year from now he's not fighting in the UFC against guys in the top 10. That's kind of where I think he's heading. We got Jasmine Yazyevidiaks. I call her Jazz, but she's one of the top female prospects in North America, and I'm not sure if she actually got signed by the Contender Series or if that's imminent. But she's just a killer. She's a little.
She's 4-0, 5-0.
4-0 as a pro, and she was 3-0 as an amateur, I think. Yeah. But I'll tell you a funny story. So right before your show, about 2 weeks before your show, I was coaching her in Pennsylvania, and I'd wrapped her hands, and we're sitting in the room, just kind of hanging out, just relaxing, before you start warming up. And she's sitting there like this, and then she leans forward and said, "You know what? Fuck this bitch for taking this fight. Fuck this bitch for thinking that she can beat me." And I'm like,
where did this come from?
I'm like, okay. I'm like, yeah. She's like, no, I'm gonna beat her to death. The fact that she thinks she can beat me, and she was not. I've been around fighters that backstage are trying to
hype themselves up,
or convince you that they're hyped up, or there's a lot going on there. I don't think she was fully aware that I was in the room. Like, I think if she had been alone, she might have sat up and said the same thing out loud. Like, she's a little fucked in a way that I kind of like for a fighter. Yeah. Like, if you can focus it, it's money. But I was like, Jesus Christ.
Anastasia. She's kind of the same way out of our grants.
She's a sweetheart though. Like, she
is. But Paul Jalbert told me a story one time. She was my amateur champion.
Yeah.
And she round 2, and this is Jalbert telling me this story. So he goes, Jamie, she's fucking crazy. I go, what do you mean? Like, because she seems so sweet and innocent all the time. She goes, second round, I walk out. She fought Tia Bison from
also
Jeff Jocelyn.
Yeah,
another really
tough, really good jiu-jitsu as well.
And there was scrap. The big two. It was a 3-round war.
Yeah.
She broke her hand, so that he didn't know that until she was sitting on the stool in front of him, and he goes, Annie, is everything okay? And she goes, no, I think I broke my hand. And he goes, what do you want to do? And he goes, Jamie, she was sitting on the stool. She leaned to look behind him and looked across the cage at the other girl and goes, I want to knock this bitch out. You just broke your hand.
Yeah.
Like, but these are the things that you never hear. So when a coach tells you that, you're like, that's so fucking cool.
Yeah, it is.
Because you don't expect her to be so barbaric when really she's super sweet, super quiet, very well spoken, articulate. But she's a kid when the cage door is closed. Savage.
It's different, and it's funny. It that seems like such an unusual combination of traits, but I think the more you get to know a lot of fighters, the more you recognize that might be what MMA fighters are, right? Because it is a very cerebral sport. It's a sport that requires an enormous amount of dedication and thought and work at different, really disparate versions of martial arts. And then you get in the cage, and there has to be something savage. There has to be something savage. And I've thought about that. One of the things that I loved about fighting is that I am an active thinker. It's always going, and that's great sometimes. And sometimes I just want my monologue to shut the fuck up. And in fighting, it did. In fighting, I shifted into a different part of my mind, maybe a more savage part of my mind, and it's freeing, and it's something that I spend most of my life trying to control. And in little windows, I can genuinely let it go. And you see that with people like Anastasia. You see that people like Jazz, people like AJ that are just genuinely nice, soft-spoken people that are polite, and it's not an act. But then they get in the cage, and the other part of them comes out, and it's very real. And that's it's why fighters, I think, are so interesting. Like, you run into this cognitive dissonance all the time. But yeah, that's I like the story about Anastasia. She's a hard worker too.
Yeah, and I respect that. I love that. I love it about that. So COVID-19 happened, bro. So I mean, where does that leave you? Like, how has it affected you mentally? How has it affected the gym? We're going into stage 3 on Friday, and I know your jurisdiction, it might be a little bit different.
Yeah, the GTHA, the Greater Toronto Hamilton area, is not.
Okay.
I'm hoping 2 weeks out, and I'm hoping start of August we can move towards something that looks like classes with students coming in. Mm-hmm. It really derailed things, and it's hard to talk about the current situation without getting into kind of this like feeling sorry for yourself. But everybody kind of is dealing with some form of bullshit through this. But I own a fight gym that focuses on contact sports, wrestling, jiu-jitsu, Muay Thai. You might be able to work boxing just by shadow boxing, but everything else is in really close contact. I was running shows, same as you. The Quintet? The Quintet shows, the grappling.
Very well done, by the way.
I appreciate it. You too. I love seeing the quality of martial arts and where it's going in Ontario. You're certainly at the forefront of that. But that the two major parts of my business that I was focusing on 12, 14 hours a day, really, really thinking about how to grow this is a martial arts gym and a show that has 1,000 people at it. And that all of that just stopped dead. Mm-hmm. And it was like I was saying to you before the cameras came on, I was working, and then it was just like you can't even plan. Like, I couldn't even do mental work when once everything shut down. Mm-hmm. So it's been kind of fucked up. And then the other thing, like, all my coping mechanisms gone. You can't train if. I was mentioning that earlier about kind of keeping the balance between being a good person and being kind of a little bit of a savage. But the training that I do is a release valve on anger and aggression.
Mm-hmm, for sure,
it keeps me from after training, you cut me off on the road, I'll wave at you. And it's fine. Like, I don't, like, I'll laugh. It's like, okay, you're a dickhead, and I don't care. If I haven't trained and something like that happens, I might get into a fist fight with somebody, and that's that's so far away from what my personality is. But I don't have the outlets that I've had since I was 14. Right? I started wrestling when I was 14 years old. I've trained 6 days a week, hard for that amount of time as a way to manage some of this, and then it's just gone. So that's been, it's, like I said, I know nobody is like pumped about how things have been going. Mm-hmm. But yeah, it's been shitty.
Yeah. I've said it quite a bit. I really feel for the gyms, because how do you get guys ready? A lot of guys are getting the contender call. We have a couple Canadians going to the UFC on Fight Island, which is super exciting. Awesome. Ronson, Gordon,
guys that I think belong there.
100%.
I'm proud of both.
How do they prepare for warfare if they don't have a gym to go to?
Yeah,
you have to do things. I mean, these guys are true professionals. They're pretty much ready, anyways.
They'd be doing. I'm sure that they'd be doing work. Like, some of our guys stayed working with one coach through this, where it was like, I actually did this with my dad. My dad and I stayed in social contact through the quarantine so that we could still train together, just the two of us, because we're in the same social circle or same family circle, right? And that was good. And some of the guys did that. The only benefit to this in terms of fight preparation is that there's no tactical disadvantage for anybody, right? It's one thing if you take a fight on 3 weeks notice or 2 weeks notice, you have a disadvantage because your opponent has had more time to get ready. But right now, everybody on earth is dealing with the same types of shit. So it kind of makes it fair. Like, if nobody really has a perfect camp and has the partners that they want and the coaches that they want, then you're still getting a pretty good look at how their skill measures up, which is, it's easier for me to accept as a coach than something that puts us behind the eight ball going into the fight.
Yeah, it's I couldn't imagine being in a position like yourself going and watching these guys needing to get ready and knowing that you can't do a Shark Tank and bring in 10 guys from the province.
I haven't even seen some of the fighters. Like we're just now getting back to the point where we're having kind of group training, and over the COVID, we weren't doing jiu-jitsu with the guys. Like we're trying to be responsible and like listen to what public health is saying and get work in for the guys without saying, fuck it, we'll do whatever we want. So I'm just now, like last week I did my first couple of training sessions. I got a jiu-jitsu session with the guys tomorrow that I'm fucking pumped about. I'm so excited to see these guys. It's like not seeing your family for 4 months. So I'm. It's
pretty depressing.
It is, man. I don't mean to be crying in my beer, but I don't have a family at home, right? I live by myself. So the guys that I see at the gym, that is my family. Those are the guys that I hang out with for hours, chat about. And again, it's weird to just have that vanish overnight as well.
Yeah. How are they taking it? Your coaches, like the staff and stuff like that?
Everybody's concerned.
Because is the gym your only source of income?
Yeah.
Yeah, so that'd be super tough.
Yeah, and we're trying to get different streams of income through the gym with, like I said, the Quintet shows, our pro fighters, our rec classes. I go into high schools and I'll teach self-defense and combat sports at high schools, and there's a bunch of different income streams through the gym. But that's, if there's no martial arts, then there's no gym, which is not good.
No. So what does the bylaw officer say when you contact them in your region? They give you a hard time?
Yes.
I know that you were saying, I was talking to you on the phone about it, and you were saying the first step is a bylaw officer, and then
public health,
and then they kind of get, then you PSO.
Yep.
So it's you have to connect yourself with a PSO in order to follow the steps to open.
Exactly. Yeah.
So what does the bylaw officer say to you?
So when I spoke to the reason I wanted to double check, and some gyms seem to be just rolling the dice and not looking into it, but there was a headline recently. Oakville gave a family $1,000 fine for rollerblading through a park. They weren't sitting down having a picnic. They were literally rollerblading around a path, and they stopped them and gave them the fine. So Oakville has shown, that's where my gym is. So they've shown that they're pretty litigious. They're showing that they will hold people accountable. Even when we had, like my dad and I training, the bylaw officer would stop by because people were calling on us.
Wow. So they were going that far.
Yeah. So as bad, I can't afford $1,000 fine. Like when we're trying to get the gym started back up, that really does make a difference. Like that $1,000 might be my salary for the month when we first open up. So we can't afford that. So when I talked to them, they said, you are part of phase 3. You are part of phase 3. We don't do anything until Oakville is in phase 3, and they're pretty clear about it. So the pro fighters, they came out a while ago and said you can train pro athletes, especially if they're competing within these frameworks, and we're following that. But the actual gym, I don't know.
It's so heartbreaking, man.
Yeah.
It's so hard. But we're on the cusp.
Yeah.
Phase 3 is like right there. Everything's about to reopen back up. I'm sure it'll be a slow process.
We're sitting here face to face. That's a step in the right direction.
It's super great. You ever get the itch to fight again?
So that's a they dropped that on me at a fucking no, that's okay. Yeah. Get a real honest answer because I didn't have time to think about it. But it's I've talked about this before. You deal with enough fighters to probably see this as well. A lot of times fighting is not something that you do; it's something that you are. And it's not like when I decided to retire that I stopped being that. I've been fist fighting since I was 5. It is genuinely part of who I am. But I did have some concussive issues in my fight career, and it's funny. I tore my tricep about a year and a half ago, and so over the past 18 months, I've trained less than I have since I was 14 years old. And I know I lost something cognitively over my fight career. I know that I probably lost, say, 10% of my brain power. And that was okay. That was a sacrifice that I was willing to make at the time for what I wanted. And I've started to have some of that fog clear over the past, especially 18 months, where my memory is better right now than it's been since probably I was in university. And the cost for competing in a fight to me may be that it makes me a worse coach. It makes me a worse business owner. That it affects my personality. And I'm 38, so I would only really be fighting because I like the way it feels. Like I'm not going to be fighting to win a title or to become fabulously wealthy. So I can spar with guys at the gym if I really get the itch, and they're great athletes that are tough guys, but they also care about me, so they'll protect me, and it's not like they're gonna sit down on a right hand because I'm a little rusty and drop me. I'm their coach, so they'll protect me. And then jiu-jitsu competition it's not fighting, and it fucking drives me crazy when somebody says they had a jiu-jitsu fight. Like you've never been kicked in the face then, because if you don't kick, like it's not a fight. Yeah. It's a great game that I love playing, but it's not a fight. But there is some value in that type of competition. I could be certainly coerced into doing some kind of jiu-jitsu super fight. That'd be interesting. But MMA is. Yeah, that's.
I mean, you're taking your guys all from show to show, and you're seeing. I couldn't imagine being in your shoes, being a former competitor, seeing these guys, throw down, and you're like, "Oh, this is intense," and then not go, "Fuck it, I got to do just one more, maybe just one more."
It's a little bit like cooking somebody else your favorite meal, and there's some real pleasure in that, right? Like you get to watch them enjoy this meal, and you know how much it tastes, but you don't get to eat any.
Yeah,
you sit there and you serve it to them, and you again you get a vicarious thrill knowing how good that meal is for them, but you don't get to eat it ever again maybe. And that is something I had to come to grips with when I shifted from fighting and coaching into just coaching, that I'm going to be in this environment. Like the first 2 years that I was coaching, when I was in the backstage, I could not help myself from shadowboxing. It was just some like I just had to. It's in that environment. That's what I do. That's kind of how I manage my anxiety. I get loose. I'm a coach. I'm just sitting there, but I still couldn't help myself from shadowboxing. I've gotten over that now because it sometimes makes the fighters nervous. But for the first 2 years, it was a tough adjustment mentally.
So because you've been fighting since 2006, walk me through some of your fights, bro. Anything that's a crazy story. Give me something juicy. You fought Manitoba, you fought in Quebec.
Yeah.
Any mismatches? Any shitty dealings?
I don't. I'm always reluctant to say anything about that in my about my career. I'm certainly willing to stand by my record and stand by the fights that I had. I took. I didn't turn down fights. I didn't turn down fights. And at the time in 2006, I mean, you're promoting now in 2020. There's hundreds of athletes of widely varying skill levels. There's an amateur league where you can build athletes up and give them matches that are reasonable. You talked to Vlad about that. How important an amateur loss is, right? There was no amateur fighting when I was a pro. And I took fights that on paper were mismatches, and I took fights that afterwards I might have said, something happened. But I took those fights knowing that they look like mismatches. I didn't take those because
you fought Jesse Gross.
That was a fun one. That was in Afghanistan.
So tell me about that.
I should have thought of that one first. So yeah,
here's the thing. I love Jesse Gross.
So do I.
A lot.
So I'm a big. He's one of the guys that I fought that we became friends because we fought. Like it's you. There tends to be one or two ways that you end up feeling about somebody after you fight them. And I've said that after you fight somebody, you really know them. Maybe better than anybody else in their life, right? You might have an idea if they're a coward or not. You might have an idea how much they're willing to bend before they break. It's things that their best friend in the world might not know about them. And it can make you, I think, the feelings that you have towards them in the fight might carry on after that. And you know that there's grudges that go on for years in this sport. But there's also the sense that nobody else in the world shares as much with me as the man that I just fought. We live the same life. We want the same things. Conor McGregor, I was not a big fan of his when he first came out, but he said something about Dustin Poirier that changed my mind a little. And they said, the trash talk between you and Dustin was ugly. It was really, really ugly. Do you hate him? He said, how can I hate a man that shares the same dreams that I have? I'm like, well, fuck. Now I'm a Conor McGregor fan right after he said that. But So Jesse and I agreed to fight in Afghanistan, which was really cool. They set up a cage right in the center of the parade ground, and there were 16,000 troops. It's in the Air Force Base in Kandahar, and it was an active war zone.
And that was the rec show.
That was the rec show. Okay. Yeah, that was Nick Castiglia and Pat Cooligan.
Yep.
And it was one of the cooler experiences I've ever had in my life. I study military history. I was very seriously considering going to the Royal Military College for a graduate degree in military history, because that was the other avenue that I considered following in my life. So having the opportunity to go to Afghanistan, I read about Alexander the Great invading Afghanistan and how he handled it. I read about the British Empire in the 1800s invading Afghanistan, the Soviets in the 80s, the Americans in the 2000s, and then I got to go there. And not only did I get to go there, but I got to
fly
fight.
a military plane too.
Oh,
right?
shit, man.
Gross told me his story.
Did he tell you the story about the landing?
No, but you could tell it.
So
he told me about the air raids.
Yeah. That was.
Tell us about it. It's great. Tell us again. It's great.
The landing. So we're in one of the big military transport jets. All the seats are facing in. It's like Mission Impossible. Looks like it was not Mission Impossible, but it looked exactly like that.
Like strapped to the wall.
Strapped to the wall, and then in the middle there was like they had the cage, but then they had like explosives.
No.
So
way.
I'm sitting facing this pallet of explosives. I'm like, cool. And then the pilot comes on. We're all wearing helmets and flak jackets.
No way. That's
because,
so cool.
Because they do try to shoot planes down, and nothing all that sophisticated. But if you look into the history of Afghanistan, the West knows that they have anti-aircraft weapons because they sold them to them in the 80s, right? The Taliban got a lot of their weapons from the United States because they were fighting the Russians. The enemy of my enemy is my friend, and it kind of bit them in the ass 30 years later. But they know that they have these weapons. So they do what's called a tactical landing. And a tactical landing, instead of taxiing down and kind of gradually circling closer to the earth, they fly in at 40,000 feet, and then they dive as quickly as they can. So you're almost in free fall for about a minute, and then they pull up at under 1,000 feet and land quickly. And they shut off all the lights inside, all the lights outside, so that you can't be seen. And they only land that way at night. and it was like, yeah, and we're like, and I'm like, okay, this is I signed up for this. I knew I was coming to an active war zone. This is part of what this is. But yeah, that was pretty intense. I also had a nap in the Prime Minister's cabin on the plane because we flew over in it's the Canadian version
who
of.
Pulled all the strings on this? How did that happen?
Pat Cooligan and Nick Castiglia. Their gym was situated in Ottawa, and I don't know the full story behind it, but I think what JTF2 is.
I've heard of it.
Yeah, it's a special forces guys for Canadians. They were some of the first Canadians to go overseas, and like Green Berets, basically. They get dropped in. And I actually don't know what they do, and I don't think anybody really does. But he had worked with a few of these guys because they were just training, and so he got a connection in the army and set this up. And they were looking for things to do for the troops. We flew over with like Paul Gross, who's the Canadian movie star. You'd recognize him if you saw him. And Guy Lafleur, the hockey player, and the Tea Party, the band. Like it was,
no shit.
Yeah, it was like nobody that's like mind-blowingly famous, but still, it was cool. And it was really, fighting is a self-centered thing. It is. It just is. There's nobody else that gets hurt, and there's nobody else that gets to share the glory. That's why I liked it. That was the one fight that I had that I said, I think I probably did some good. With this, I think I helped people in a tough situation maybe feel a little bit closer to home for at least one night, and that's not something you always get in fighting. But the weird thing is with Jesse, back to that, because I know he's a buddy of yours. He's a buddy of mine. He's a sweetheart. Actually, I'd love to get a whiskey with him if he's watching. But there was only 10 fights. Or 5 fights, so there's only 10 fighters.
So who was it? There was Boyan.
Boyan was on it.
Pecker?
Pecker was on it, yeah.
Yourself?
Myself. Jesse and I were the main event.
Jeff Harrison go?
No, I don't think so. There was a couple of kids that didn't stay in MMA much longer after that.
Ronson?
Ronson was not there, no.
Was he supposed to go?
He may have been. There's a couple.
I feel like he went. I almost feel like he told me that.
He's been to Dubai and Abu Dhabi a number of times, but I don't think he's never been to Afghanistan. I cornered him a couple of times in Abu Dhabi, and he was supposed to fight for Putin. Ronson had an opportunity to fight for Putin and his like his senior staff in a private show in Russia for like 300 people. And it got, I can't remember why it fell through, but we were talking about doing this, and I learned how to say "It's nice to meet you, Mr. Putin" in Russian, just in case.
Let's hear it.
Приятно познакомиться, Mr. Putin. Я на грони по-русски.
Wow.
Yeah, it's not. I said it to Vlad to test it out. He's like, Roy, I think you might be having a stroke. So it sounds good if you don't know Russian, but if you know Russian, it's a little garbled. But but that would have been, and it fell through, but that would have been fucking cool. But yeah, back to Jesse and I. So 10 guys traveling in close quarters, and Jesse's a hard nosed guy. He's like, he mean mugs his opponent, and he's not playing around about it. And I've never been that way. I certainly will smash somebody. I have no problem breaking their nose with my elbow, but I'm not going to mean mug you before the fight. It's just not the way I approach competition. It's a game I have to play with myself. So we're in Afghanistan. I'm not being shitty to him. And actually, he told me we were going into the cafeteria, and I held the door open for him. Like as they're walking through, I just made sure it didn't close in his face. And he told me after, he's like, man, I was so fucked up by that. He's like, I couldn't,
Really?
I want to dislike the person that I'm fighting. And he's like, you seemed like a nice guy. So it was hard to get into that mind frame. But we had a good scrap, a good back and forth scrap. And he performs well. I trained with him after we fought, and I had a much easier time with him in jiu-jitsu than I had in the fight. In the fight, he was shutting things down well and hurting me when I tried to open up. But we chatted afterwards, and that's one of those things. Genuinely earned a little bit of respect for each other. You know, he's a tough guy. I'm a tough guy. We fought it out, and afterwards shook hands and had a beer. It's maybe one of my favorite things about the sport when it does play out that way.
When he was on, he told me a story about when they do the pre-fight meeting. They basically said, okay, they had a bombing right where the cage was the day, like a few days before. So the Taliban had bombed the base, and they said in the rules meeting, so they're saying, okay, no downward elbows.
Yeah.
And if you hear the air raid sirens, get out of the cage if you're in the cage and go under the cage.
Yeah.
And he's like,
yeah, that was generally part of the rules meeting.
So who sanctioned that fight? Like, how did that work?
It was. I don't really know. I think it's Afghanistan, so it's like literally the Wild West. And I think they flew over Brian Beauchamp, who's a ref and involved with the commission. So I wasn't involved. That was
I worked with him on the amateur stuff. He did a lot of our
with Beauchamp.
Yeah, he did a lot of our referee courses.
That's where I met him as well. But I was just fighting that. I wasn't paying attention to the logistics of it. That one was fucking cool. That was a really cool experience. It was a really cool experience. I met so Peter MacKay. They're talking about maybe being the head of the Conservative Party, the next head of the Conservative Party. And when I was in Afghanistan, he was the secretary or the Minister of Defense in the cabinet. So he was over there. And I met him and a guy named General Nitinchuk, who was the head of not just the Canadians, he's Canadian, but he was head of the Allied forces over there. And so we met them on a runway with the mountains overlooking us. And it was cool. They both gave a speech. General Nitinchuk in particular, I think if I'd been a little bit younger and heard what he said, I might have joined the military. Like that might have been something. It was so, and it's why he's in charge, right? It was really, really cool. So that was neat. And it's kind of neat to see him be kind of MacKay to become relevant again, like 10 years later.
Yeah, that's crazy.
Yeah.
The Afghanistan trip, was it hot? What was the time? Well, like, how did you train? How do you prep for that when you're there? Do you have to cut weight? Do you do weigh-ins?
Because we were all traveling and the situation was a little fucked up, and it wasn't so much that it was hot, it was really, 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 really dry. And the sand it's not It's not like the sand you'd have on a beach. It's almost powder, and it will end up in the air everywhere. So when most of the military transports move in and out at night just for stealth reasons, but as they're driving, it's like it's almost like being in mist, like fog, because the powdery dust is so thin that it just sits in the air. So it wasn't so much the heat as it was this almost silica that you'd be breathing in, and so you just felt dry all the time. And they kept pallets probably the size of these two tables, taller than you, everywhere. They said you should have a water on you always, one in your hand always. And because that was so important, they said we're not cutting weight.
So did you fight at a higher weight class?
Yeah, we fought at 165.
Oh shit.
And I fought. I mean, now I'm 185, 190. I've been as high as 210, but I fought at 155, and I was thinking about dropping down. My last fight was against Desmond Green. He ended up at 145 in the UFC, and he was bigger than me. He was significantly bigger than me in the fight. And I remember thinking, if I fight again, I'm going to 45, which is kind of crazy now that I'm 60 pounds heavier than that. But that was the plan.
Now you were supposed to fight Ainsley Robinson. Was that supposed to be for me?
3 times. 3 times we had a fight that we agreed on, and just fell through.
Because I saw on the Tapology, or maybe it was Sherdog, and it was 2014, and I feel like you were supposed to fight on, like, maybe my first pro show, or maybe my second.
Alex Caparici really liked that fight.
Yeah.
And so he tried to set it up a couple times. I liked it too. Ainsley, I wrestled him actually.
Because he's a wrestler too.
Yeah, and Olympic wrestler, and again a good guy. And sometimes you want to fight somebody because fuck that guy, I want to smash him. And sometimes I want to fight that guy because that's an interesting problem. I want to see how that
two wrestlers, and that sometimes negates the wrestling entirely,
and you end up in it with an interesting striking match. And maybe I can't shut his takedowns down, right? Because he's very, very good. But I'm pretty solid off my back. So it's an interesting. I was into a lot of the. At that point in my career, I was pretty sure I wasn't going to the UFC or anywhere major. So at that point, I was fighting because I find it interesting. But when I signed the contract, I went down to the Fight Network. Got interviewed by Robin Black on when he had the segment on the Fight Network.
Yeah.
Signed the contract to fight him. Came back to practice, and Josh Hill sprawled on my thumb, and my thumbnail touched the back of my hand. Dislocated my thumb, shredded the tendons, and I was out for 10 months. I was in a cast from my knuckle to my.
Was that
elbow.
supposed to be on my show?
I think so.
Yeah, because
might have been the first one.
Yeah, because
the very first
I
one.
remember them. I remember it because when I first met Alex and Woody, and I didn't really know all the fighters yet. I didn't know who was who, but I remember Ainsley Robinson. It stood out, and my friend lives in Whitby. And he was saying, "Oh, you know Ainsley. This is with."
Yeah.
He was kind of putting it together for me. I didn't know who it was.
You had Richie on that show, right? On the first show, it was
not the first one. He was on the second one.
Was it the second one?
Yeah,
so maybe I was supposed to be in the second one. It was super hot in an arena. Was that your show?
No. There was an SEC show.
Yes, that's the one I was thinking.
That was the super hot one.
Yeah, that was.
But they were really close. I think that one was in June or July, and then my show was October.
Yeah.
So, but I know we were negotiating with you and Ainsley. And when I saw that, I was like, "Oh yeah, shit! He was supposed to fight for me." So I almost had you.
Yeah, that would have been fun.
Yeah.
Have you talked at all about your last show that you guys did?
A little bit here and there.
Man, that I do want to say that kind of on record. I was when I heard that it was in a nightclub, and I've been kind of thinking about the logistics of how to run shows because I'm doing the jiu-jitsu shows like we mentioned. I'm like, I'm curious to see how that works out because it's not usually spaced in a way that you can fill a room. But I was blown away. That's one of the outside of. I went to you remember when they used to do the UFC at the Hard Rock in the theater?
Yep.
It reminded me of that, and I loved that. That's my favorite kind of venue to see a fight. In the big, huge, enormous arenas, I feel a little disconnected. But in that size space, it was beautiful to look at. The fans were into it. It was you did a bang up job. I hope to see more like that.
Oh man, I want to be back at it so bad. So I'm trying to keep in contact with everybody just to say, hey, I talked with Luke from the commission. He's coming on.
Yeah, he's a good dude. We talked about that on the phone.
Yeah, he's such a great guy, such a great commissioner, and we need that. And that was a thing we were battling against for years when it was Hayashi. It was just too much. Luke came in, So when I called them, I said, we were talking about doing a show with no crowd.
Yep.
And because of Quebec, what happened is they're not going to do any combat sports until there's a vaccine. So that shut down that whole region.
Yeah.
So I called them just to say, like, hey, like, is this shit going to spread across Canada? Is this what we're going to be? And he had no clue. He goes, I don't know. I'm still at home. I haven't been at work. I just want to go back to my office. I'm tired of being home. So I mentioned, I go, can you do a podcast with me? And then he goes, well, actually, I saw your podcast. I saw it with Dr. Faisal, and I saw it with Muzamo.
Yep.
He goes, I just have to send him all the questions that I can ask him, because he has to get permission from his supervisor.
Yeah, of course.
Superiors.
He's not speaking to his own opinion.
Because it's kind of like it'd be a media sit with him.
Of course, yeah. He's speaking on behalf of the Ontario Athletic Commission. So that's not like his own opinion, right? That he's speaking for a government agency. That makes sense.
But I said, what about doing a show no crowd? And I crunched the numbers. I thought maybe we'd do it in a gym, even if you did it in Parabellum, for example. We just went in the gym, went into the cage, and just filmed it and did a pay-per-view.
Yep.
It just still won't work. The only way you just can't do it.
Yeah.
You'd have to be able to sell 10,000 seats, 10,000 pay-per-views. And that's hard to do.
I was looking at something similar with jiu-jitsu, like doing a quintet from inside the gym and just streaming it out. And that's maybe a little bit more realistic because it's an amateur competition. I've spoken to Luke about I would love to get to the point where it's professional jiu-jitsu. Like I want to get to the point where I can pay somebody to come in and compete against our athletes, maybe Gordon Ryan or Gary Tonner or one of the big names in jiu-jitsu right now, get them competing here. But right now, if it's not boxing, MMA, or kickboxing, you are not allowed to pay athletes to compete in a combat sport. Just straight up not allowed. So I'm trying to get athletes, give them big chunks of their ticket sales because I'm not paying them to compete. I'm paying them to sell tickets, which is kind of a loophole. But I want to get these guys paid. It's reasonable. But right now, I can deal with kind of amateur level athletes, so I don't have a payroll for the athletes, and then put the show out there and do it at a price point that maybe $5 or $10, something that because our cost would be fairly low. So you do it to make ourselves a little bit of money and do something maybe for the community with the idea that we're building towards a big show.
So explain to everybody the quintet, how it works. It's a 5-on-5?
Yeah, so this is actually
because this is so super cool.
Man,
and I'm not even a jiu-jitsu guy.
It is really neat. So it's Sakuraba, right? So this is actually something he brought out in Japan. And when I tore my elbow, I was sitting at home, crying into my beer, trying to figure out what I was going to do when my arm healed. And I started watching this grappling competition from Japan, and I immediately fell in love with it. So the idea is, it's a 5-on-5 competition with only one of your athletes competing against the other at a time. So the first two guys grapple, and it's submission only. There's no points. So if one guy gets submitted, he's out. But if you win, you stay in against the next guy, right?
So one guy can
theoretically
crush
one guy could crush a whole team.
How long does the show last? 5-on-5. How long does that last?
It depends. Like any combat sport, our around 40 to 45 minutes, maybe sometimes into around an hour if you have every match kind of grind out. But that's only happened once.
Is there a time limit?
Yeah. So it's each. So there's a bunch of little kind of cool nuanced rules because it's 5 people. You don't have individual weight classes. It's a team weight class. So your team has to weigh less than 900 pounds. But how you fill that is up to you. So you could have, 2 or 3 200-pounders and a couple of little guys if you think that.
Are these a rule set that you made?
What's that?
Is this or Sakuraba's rule set?
So Sakuraba had some of these rules, and then I took that as a base. I don't want to do exactly what he's doing. I love the idea of it, and then I'm kind of applying the things that I want to see. And it is kind of neat because it's not like the MMA commission where you say, I want to see pride rules so we can kick people in the face in this on the ground. It'd be cool if you could do that, but the commission says no bueno. But there's no commission for this. So if I say I want to try, that's not true. The OJA I'm working with, but they're really flexible about the rules that we're playing with. So I can play with things from show to show. So you have 900 pounds. So you'll get these mismatches where we had a guy, on the last show, we had a guy from TriStar. His name's Javad Mahood, and he's an Iranian judoka.
Cool story. Hold on. So Dara went to Quebec to interview some of the fighters for the last show.
Yeah.
He was supposed to be on the card, right?
Javad, yeah.
Yeah.
So he in fact, Cool story. This guy's got such a cool story. Sorry, it just we both lit up as soon as he said his
Javad,
name.
yeah,
because we were supposed to have him on the card.
He made a big impression on me too.
Yeah,
no pun intended. He's a fucking giant.
Yeah.
Did you guys meet him in person?
I didn't get to meet Javad. I met his buddy Mustafa. He wasn't there.
Yeah.
Things got kind of mixed around, and then COVID happened. Or
Yeah.
The other things.
But he's enormous. He's 6'5". He's like the mountain. Like he's huge, and like just the proportion of his body. His thighs are like this, but because of the rule set, he ended up going against the guy that weighs about 150 pounds. A very, very good black belt that weighs about 150 pounds. Mm-hmm. And so what the rule set says that the smaller guy gets to determine whether he wants a shorter match or a longer match. If there's less than 40 pounds difference, the matches are 8 minutes. If there's more, the smaller guy can say, I want a 4-minute match. And that becomes kind of a strategy thing where I can play as a smaller guy. Maybe I play to eliminate both of us, because if it's a draw, you both get out. So 4 minutes, if I can avoid getting submitted for 4 minutes, you get eliminated too.
And you take out the big guy.
And what I loved on our show is that the little guy said, no, I want the 8 minutes. I want the full, I want a chance to submit this guy. And it was like watching a child attack a giant man. Like he tried to shoot in on him and just bounced off his thigh. And then ended up catching a high elbow guillotine. And it was on tight, and this Javad stood up, and there's a great picture because we do our event on a raised platform about as high as this table, but with no cage around the edge, right? Because it's
I wish we could do
grappling.
fights like that.
It'd be fucking cool.
Kumite style.
Did you ever
like
see
Bloodsport?
what's his name? Chuck Norris had a fight league that was done in an open arena with curved edges, and so they fought on the flat platform. The idea is, as you feel this curve, you know that you're almost out of bounds, and so you circle in. But it was kind of a free open form. There's some bananas knockouts in that. It was so
because that's like point karate style.
It was it was point karate style, but full contact. Mm-hmm. So you'd have some of these guys throwing those karate Brazilian axe kicks and landing on the temple and just iced. So that was fun. I like that. I like that one. But there's a great picture. So
So what are you using for a platform?
I've tried a couple of different things.
Boxing ring.
I used a boxing ring, but that's not ideal because they've got the 4 posts and it's rough. We're grappling. It's not fantastic. So for the last one, I got in touch with a light and stage company and had them bring in a stage, and then I made a vinyl cover with our logo and then some sponsors' logos. Really did a high quality job, and then I used puzzle mats and I got carpet matting to put underneath. And then I
like an underlay.
Underlay, and then I tied it all down. So it was a little bit do it yourself, but it looked great. Like it really it worked out way better than I had any right to hope. But the only downside is that it is an open platform. So Javad stands up in this guillotine and just walks off the stage, just walked right off the stage. And Garmo was pissed. That Garmo's the guy in it. He again shoves him, and then he moves back 5 feet because Javad's so big.
So what happens if he walks you off the stage?
It's disqualification. If you go off the stage and I like this. They say if you have to choose between tapping out and walking off the stage, it's the same as tapping out. Yeah. Right, like that's not an escape. That's. But
it's smart though, because then he just eliminated the other guy too, right?
No, because it counts as a win.
Oh,
so that counts as a submission win for David. So David stayed in. But to Javad's credit, like I said, just a massive, pretty scary looking guy. But he came up afterwards and said, I had no idea that the edge was there. I just couldn't see. He said I was looking up trying to fight the hands and I stepped off. And he went and talked to Garmo, the guy that was attacking him, and said the same thing. Like, I'm sorry, I wasn't trying to put you at risk. I just didn't see. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, man, what a good guy. That goes a long way with me. And this is maybe something that I don't mind addressing this. I'm involved in fighting because I give a shit about things like honor. I really do. Like it's not something that's a game for me the way it is for some people. I do this because I really do want to live an honorable life, and I want to do something where you can act honorably for real in a meaningful way. And that demonstrated some honor to me. I did something inappropriate that I think could be misconstrued, and so I'll be the bigger man and I'll apologize. Mm-hmm. And that for me shows me a lot about a person's character, and because of that, I will work with him anytime he wants in any regard. It really does make an impression on me.
Yeah, that's what I like about you. You're a very traditional martial artist, and I can see that in you. It's like you almost got like that super uncle. what I mean? Like the super uncle that comes around that everybody just loves. But you're definitely a true martial artist. I really like that about you.
I appreciate it, brother. It's funny because I started in wrestling, which is the least martial art, right? Like you don't bow to anybody. There's no belts. But what it does is that you do end up with an enormous amount of respect for your training partners. You have an enormous amount of respect for the mat because you bleed on it every day. You break your ears, you break your nose, you look a little different every time you look in the mirror because of what happens on the mats. And you learn to respect it, and you learn to behave a certain way when you're in that environment. And that matters more to me than having a student bow and call me sensei or professor or whatever. I don't care. I do not give a shit. But you better behave in a way that I consider to be honorable on the mat with your training partners, with your opponents, with your coaches. And I don't think having a picture of Helio Gracie above the mats or making students bow to the mat every time they come in necessarily helps that attitude. I think demonstrating respect. Showing them when I'm in the ring and something happens that I don't like, when somebody a ref fucks up or the coach on the other side does something stupid that I don't like, I don't lose my mind. I don't throw a stool. I don't have a temper tantrum. I act like an honorable professional, and it's an opportunity to demonstrate that in this sport. It's one of the things I love about it.
Yeah, it truly shows.
I appreciate that. I have guys like Bobby that are starting to do the same thing. I'm really proud of how he carries himself. He fought for you. I'm proud of how he behaves when he wins. I'm proud of how he behaves when things are difficult.
You guys always been very, very super easy to deal with. I just wish I got to deal with you more.
Yeah, well, this is the start. This has been awesome, man. I love this. I feel like I haven't had a face-to-face conversation with somebody.
I think the last time I saw you didn't have a beard either.
I didn't. This has been my hobby over the.
It looks great.
I appreciate it.
I have beard envy because
but literally, because we locked down I think a week after
the show,
and I just stopped shaving when we locked down. I'm like, well, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter now, anyways. By the end of summer, I'll be able to play any of the Kings of England. That I want.
You play the bagpipes.
I do, yeah.
That is so cool.
That's been.
Tell me about
it. I could geek out about this in a big way. I'll try not to
geek out because I would love to. Scott Lamont.
Yes,
he fought an amateur a bunch of times.
Yeah, I recognize his name.
Begged him to come up to bagpipes. Begged him. Come on, bro. And he's like, "Oh, I'm gonna come out to Wu-Tang, or I'm gonna come out to the." I'm like, "No, man, you're Scottish. Come out to bagpipes."
Yeah. That's what they're for.
Yeah, like warfare. A friend of mine, we did a podcast last year. Canadian military man. He told me that one of the most beautiful exercises he ever saw was when they trained with the Scottish military. They all met down in Fort Benning, maybe somewhere in Florida. And they train with the Rangers, the Canadians, and the Scots. Like all these people come around the world, and they do this big open training session. And he said the most beautiful thing he had ever seen in a training exercise was when the Scottish soldiers came down the mountain. They were playing the bagpipes. So as the war was, as they were doing this drill, this exercise, they were playing the bagpipes at the same time. He goes, it stopped everybody in their tracks because it was mesmerizing.
Yeah,
whoa!
It punches you in the soul. Like it hits the sound of the pipes, especially close up, it's almost not fully auditory. Like part of it is you feel it in your guts. I'll get a little bit into my family history without geeking out too much about it, but there was something in the 1700s called the Highland Clearings. And what happened, there was a major uprising called Culloden, where some of the Scots tried to put a Catholic king back in power in the UK, and they lost. And the result was that the English came in and they said, you can't wear kilts, you can't play the bagpipes, you can't speak Gaelic, you can't be Catholic. And my family was a Highland Gaelic-speaking Catholic clan. And so they came in and cleared us out. Wow. They cleared us out. 20,000. My family name is the McDonells of Glengarry. And we come from a part of Scotland very close to Loch Ness. My family castle is about 5 kilometers south of the southern tip of Loch Ness. And there's nobody in Scotland with my last name anymore. Every Catholic McDonald was shipped out against our will. And we were shipped to Canada, and some people ended up in the United States. And that was in 1750 that my family, we were one of the first clans to be cleared out. And because of that, the things that they told us that we weren't allowed to do, the things that were connected to our culture, the kilts, the bagpipes, speaking Gaelic, became important to my family in a generational way. So when I was 8 or 9, my grandpa brought me to the largest Highland Games on earth outside of Scotland, which is in Maxville, Ontario. And that's where my family was settled.
Where's that?
About an hour from Ottawa.
Okay.
It's in the Ottawa Valley.
Okay.
And that's where the McDonells of Glengarry were settled. And to this day, it's the largest Highland Games on earth outside of Scotland. And I went, and I remember hearing the pipes, and it's like you said, there's this sense when you hear them or you see them when they're played well and in unison, it's mesmerizing. It captures you in a way. And then it's also connected to my heritage, so I wanted to learn to play, and my family was encouraging. And I started playing when I was 14. I had the opportunity to compete at a World Championships in Scotland, in Glasgow, which
so you're like fucking full-fledged.
I went full bore until I started fighting. And then, broken fingers, broken nose, broken teeth. Sometimes after 6-7 hours of training, when my body's all fucked up, I don't want to go try to fight the bagpipes for an hour. So I fell out of playing them. Beyond just like occasionally at funerals or weddings for friends, I'd strike them back up. But with COVID, I'm sitting at home all day, every day, and I really fell back in love with them. And it's been something that has kept me sane through this, because like I said, so many of my other mechanisms of coping have just disappeared. This gets the same type of focus from me that fighting does, or that rolling does. I am not thinking a conscious internal monologue when I'm playing. I'm focusing on playing and having it sound correct, and that for me it's more important than sleep in some ways. Being able to shut that monologue off in my brain and just get some rest from it.
Yeah,
the pipes help.
That's so cool. I love the sound of the bagpipes. There's a lady, when we first moved into my house, somebody would go into the park right behind I didn't even have a fence at the time.
Yeah.
And she was awful. It was like, I was like, oh, bagpipe. And your ears perk up. You're like, and then it was like,
no, it's not so good.
I wanted to throw rocks at her.
Yeah.
So like, it doesn't even sound good. I love the
cat.
pipes. Yeah. Hard to play?
They're, Are you musically inclined?
Not really.
Not really.
Drums.
So, drums?
On tables.
You're musically inclined?
Yeah.
With the bagpipes, it doesn't have a fully chromatic scale. Okay, it was never intended to be played with other instruments. It is its own unique thing. It was meant to be played. It's an instrument of war. In British law, it's considered an instrument of war. I read a book about this, and they said that one of the uprisings, the innumerable Scottish uprisings, they caught a guy that was playing the bagpipes, and they hung him. And in his trial, he said, I wasn't armed. He said, it doesn't matter. The Scots won't fight without the bagpipes. Playing the bagpipes at a rebellion is no different than carrying a sword. So in British law, it is considered an instrument of war, which
makes sense when my friend describes when they were doing a military exercise.
That's what it's for.
He said, even the Americans, he said they were tearing up. It was beautiful.
It does. And people, I found, I live across the street from a police station, and I'll go and play on their property, and they fucking love it. They every day I get just thumbs up. People, there's something about the way I look when I run into cops in the wild. They're not super friendly, and I'm not an aggressive guy. I mean, you know me well enough to know that, but I've never once gotten a warning from a cop. Anytime I've spoken to a cop, they have prosecuted me to their fullest ability. But when I'm playing the pipes, they're so friendly and appreciative, and I think it might be the type of person that's attracted to being a soldier or to being a cop. The military association with the pipes, I think, does touch something close to their heart. But yeah, that's and I love getting that reaction. You see these hard-nosed Green Beret soldiers with a tear rolling down their eye. Like it's really. I'll tell you a cool story too. I live in Hamilton. Downtown Hamilton, which has a bunch of interesting different cultures. But as I was playing one day, I had a Somalian family stop and listen to me for a few minutes. And the mother was in, not a full burqa, but in a hijab. Very clearly recent Somalian immigrants. And there's a Somalian immigrant center on my street. That's how I know specifically their culture. But they loved it, and they I can't imagine they've run into the bagpipes all that much. And then I had an East Indian woman named Artie stop and said, my father was in the Indian Army, and his unit had bagpipes because the British were in India for 200 years, and in India didn't like the British, but they liked the bagpipes and like cricket and tea. So they kept all those and told the Brits to fuck off. But she said, hearing that makes me think of my father. Then 10 minutes after that, there's at the other end of the street, there's a senior center that's connected to a native one of the Six Nation tribes, and a woman came over and said, "I'm waiting to see my mom," and she said, "I got to tell you, I love the sound of the pipes. I don't have a whole lot of experience with them." And I told her a little bit about the Highland clearing. She said, "It sounds like you have the same connection with this that I do when I'm at one of the native gatherings and I hear the drums, and it's connected to culture and it's connected to a broader sense of who I am." And it was like in one night, it was like bang, 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 3 incredibly disparate cultures that all felt something when they heard the pipes.
I think everybody feels something when they hear the pipes. So that's right. You either love it or you hate it.
Yes. It's right? It's not. Nobody's kind of like, man, they're okay.
No,
it's like either shut the
fuck
fuck up or like come play my backyard every day.
Yeah. I love the sound of them.
Yeah, it's cool.
You should. Can you do the national anthem?
So this is one of the things that we're going to explain. Just because you're a little bit more musically inclined, it doesn't have a fully chromatic scale, which means music that is not written for the bagpipes will always sound a little bit off. It doesn't have the ability to play any tune. It doesn't have the ability to flatten or sharpen notes, and it doesn't have the ability to shift octaves. It is meant to play bagpipe music.
Okay, so how does it work? You have a sack that goes underneath the arm.
You got a couple of sacks, yeah.
Okay,
so
explain it to me.
There's no way to talk about bagpipes without it sounding like we're describing a porn. Like it's.
So let's hear it then.
So under your left arm, there's a bag.
Okay. What's the bag made of?
You're asking some really in-depth questions. So there's one of the things that I'm playing around with is how much of my bagpipes I want to be kind of traditional and organic, and how much I want to play with newer technologies that are maybe a little bit easier to maintain, but not quite as traditional. So usually they're made with either cow or sheep leather, and then you have to season them, and you have to make sure that they're airtight, and there's maintenance that goes into it. I have a synthetic bag that you never have to do anything to. It's airproof, waterproof, and that's cool. But playing it is not the same. It doesn't have the same feedback to it. I was talking to Lucas. You might get a kick out of this. You like cars? So I was telling Lucas about some of these choices. Like, Rory, it sounds like you have a classic car. He's like, because there's choices that you can make about something that's going to make my bagpipe sound better, and then there's choices that I make about something that's going to make it look cooler, and they're all really expensive. And it's like literally having a classic car that you want to tweak and work on.
What do bagpipes cost you?
I'm looking at getting a set of small pipes. Small pipes are about, say, 70% quieter than the big pipes, and they're meant to be played. They are fully chromatic. They're meant to be played with a guitar, and I'm looking at around probably between $2,000 and $4,000.
Jeez.
But that's handmade, bespoke instrument with my specifications made the way I want. And it's a little bit like, I was talking to a guy, it's a little bit like, I think, getting a good tattoo. I know you've got some great tattoos. Depending on the person, somebody might say, I have this forever, so I'm going to spend $5,000. I'm going to meet the person. I'm going to talk about this for months and get exactly what I want. And some people say, I just want a tattoo, so I'll pay $200. And there is that, you could go that way too. But this is something, I saw a video that changed the way I thought about this a little bit. They said, you don't want to think about yourself as the owner of an instrument. You're the steward of an instrument. If you take care of it, it should last 2 or 3 or even 4 human lifetimes, right? So if I ever have kids, I would love to pass on a beautiful instrument as an heirloom, especially because it's so connected to my family history. And even if I don't have kids, passing it on to another musician with a beautiful, well-maintained instrument that after I'm gone still continues to create something beautiful that makes people happy. That's an investment I'm certainly willing to make.
So how does it work? You blow into the stem?
You blow into the stem, fill the bag with air. There's 4 reeds. There's 3 drones, and they each play a single note in harmony with one another and with what you play the melody on, which is called the chanter. In the chanter is a double cane reed, very much like what would be in any woodwind instrument.
Like a clarinet.
A clarinet has a single reed, but like an oboe. An oboe has a double reed where instead of on a saxophone or a clarinet.
I played the clarinet for a little bit in school when I was
so
a kid. So I remember putting the wooden reed.
The bagpipes are a woodwind instrument. They're made from African blackwood the same way that a clarinet is, and they would have a cane reed the same way. It's just the mechanisms are a bit different.
Okay.
You strike the bag in, and air continuously flows through all 4 reeds. Each one of the drones playing a single note as harmony, and then the melody on the double reed. And because it's continuous, there's no you have to play legato. You cannot break up the notes. You cannot flatten or sharpen them because it is a continuous flow of air. So the tuning, rather than tuning by ear as you play with more or less air pressure, you tune mechanically and then you play. And you kind of have to tune every 10 or 15 minutes because it is kind of variable.
So how do you tune?
You lengthen or shorten the length of the tube. So I've got and this is kind of one of the other things that I've loved about this is there's so many little skills that go into being good at this. Learning how to use we use waxed hemp as a way to make things airtight with Teflon wrapped around the outside, and the way you wrap it, you can actually thread it. So as I twist the pipes, it will lower or raise depending on whether I'm turning to the right or the left. So there's all these little geeky skills that I can fuck around with when I'm at home trying to get these pipes to sound really good. So I was at a Scottish shop not too long ago, and they let me play one of their high end set of pipes, like a $7,000 or an $8,000 set of pipes. Wow. Just really nice. And they didn't sound as good as my pipes. And my pipes are nowhere near.
Is that because it's custom to you?
And I play them every day, and I'm tweaking them, and I know how they work, and I know how to get the best sound out of them. Where these are, if you gave them to me for a year, I could probably get them sounding as good as those pipes could sound, but it's the process of doing it. You open a bit of a Pandora's box here.
It's okay. It's cool. But
I really do tend to wear my passion on my sleeve, and if you find something that I'm into, it's hard to shut me up.
No, it's cool because I'm interested because bagpipes, every time I see somebody playing them, I get mesmerized and I watch them. I see the and then it's just like it's almost like the air goes up really, really, really slow, and it's like.
It's so one of the ways that I've always thought about it, instead of thinking about the bag as the mechanism of driving the music, I think about blowing into the air pipe as the mechanism of blowing the reeds. So my air goes directly from my mouth into the pipe and through the reeds. And then when I need to take a breath, and then I go right back to blowing. So the bag is more like it's just to allow you to catch your breath before you continue to play the instrument.
So it holds the air.
It holds the air for a second. Sense. Rather than, and you can hear when a shitty bagpipe player is trying to play with the bag, that's where it gets that wavering sound, and it's like that almost like a wheezing, because they're not continuing getting a continuous flow of the same amount of air pressure. And I even looked into I went really geeky with some of this, but I looked into making my own what's it, not a nanometer, but it's something that measures airflow. You can do it with a simple tube and water to measure the amount of airflow that you have while you're playing, just to make sure that it's consistent and that you're not getting that wavering sound through the reeds. Huh. And I've said, bagpipes, when they're good, can be something really beautiful that I think connects with people. And when it's bad, you might end up hating Scottish culture, right? So it's not like there's no gray area. So I really am invested. If I'm going to do this, I want to be good at it.
Yeah, go all in.
Because they have their kind of built-in own accompaniment. So like violin needs piano, but
they have their own drones.
Yeah.
And what's actually really cool. So I've been looking at the next step I want to play is these small pipes, and small pipes are bellows driven. So that means there's nothing going into my mouth. I have under my right arm the same type of bellows that you would use to start a fire, and that puffs air into the bag, and then I play the bag.
Oh, okay.
So what it allows you to do, and the small pipes they're meant to sound like a fiddle. So they're meant to go with a concertina or a tin whistle or somebody singing or a guitar, where big pipes you just couldn't do it volume-wise. And what I don't know if I'll be able to do this, but I have a dream. I would love to have these small set and learn how to sing along with my own playing, and then play in a pub somewhere. Like that's like I don't want to do it.
So we have your retirement goal right now.
Yeah, but I think that'd be so much fun. Like I don't need I don't even want to be on a stage. I want to sit in the corner of a pub, maybe with a pint of Guinness and maybe a glass of whiskey as well, and just play for a couple hours and maybe sing along. I think that would do something good for my soul. That would be something that would be fun, and it's not a big dream.
No, that's super cool.
But I would if it takes me 5 years to get to the point where I can do that, I think it'd be worth it.
That's really cool. Yeah,
so,
I'd love to go watch that.
Yeah.
I'll
tell you what. If I get once I've done a few and I don't feel like I fucking suck, I might tell people about it. But for a while, this is going to be like I might go to a different city.
It's cool that we went from MMA to bagpipes.
Oh, I think you can transition.
Yeah, for sure.
Scottish fighter, you could do the walkout.
You have to do a walkout for somebody.
I would. I actually got piped out to my very first fight. I did have I hired a piper and I wore my kilt, wore my family tartan, and I certainly would do that for a fighter, but not if I'm coaching.
Gotcha.
Not if I'm coaching.
See, I wish Scott did it because I go, dude, I'll get a piper for you, man.
If you can talk him into it, I'll do it. Do it. I'd pipe him in. That would be a lot of fun.
Yeah,
I'll go the full regalia too.
Yeah, for sure. That's the only way to do it.
You got to. Yeah.
Could you imagine like main event prospects Rebel nightclub?
Yeah.
Like the headline fight, right? Everything's all the same, and then like lights go down.
It's true warfare. I feel like it's warfare.
And then just.
That's the thing. It is.
That's why everyone liked Roddy Piper.
Roddy Piper's awesome. Yeah.
Right? You get the whole. It's just amazing.
This is a fun conversation, and honestly, guys, I really appreciate you being patient and curious because one of the things about my mind, I get really, really into things, and I don't always have a great sense of what's interesting to other people. So I'll go off on something the way I just did about bagpipes without really getting that somebody's not into it. So I appreciate you being willing to listen and asking relevant questions.
Too, right?
Yeah, it's I don't get people that are necessarily willing to sit and listen.
No, I think it's the coolest.
That's what
I'm like, how can I incorporate that into the video?
I think about it all the time. Yeah, that's what I probably think what introduced you to the bagpipes.
Yeah,
that's so cool.
So what instruments do you play?
I grew up playing the violin.
Oh, very nice.
So when I was like 5, it was a matter of family discipline, keep you working hard or whatever.
Yeah.
So I played that, and then it was never my passion, but it was discipline, lots of work. And then when I finished high school, I stopped playing formally.
Violin's another instrument that's interesting because it's only when you're talking about sad shit.
Yeah.
You know.
It is. They both have that same kind of haunting, drawn out sound that can draw a tear to your eye. I was like fiddle music too.
Yeah.
Is that what's
so? I did a lot of fiddle music. Yeah, Celtic, Irish, all
Yeah.
that kind of stuff. I used to go to music camps where they did that. I went to
Band camp,
a
yeah,
fiddle music thing in Godrich.
You didn't want to say band camp.
Yeah, no, I know. That's
well, this one time at band camp.
but it's funny. The what I was telling you guys about earlier, the Highland clearings. The reason fiddle music is Scottish and Celtic is because they banned the pipes. Okay. And so everybody they looked for somewhere else to play their music, and the fiddle was the next best thing. And the concertine is like the you ever see the it's like an accordion but smaller. Okay. Like it sits almost in the palm of your hand instead of being one of the big ones with the keyboard.
Okay, yeah, I've seen it.
So it's another Irish instrument.
Well, I was always, as a kid growing up, I was a fan of Ashley McIsaac. So I used to love listening to his type of music and whatnot.
Yeah, he's I'm learning to play a tune right now called Ashley McIsaac's Jig.
That's the guy from Nova Scotia. Right?
Yeah, and he's and kind of like he kind of like a punk Celtic guy. So he'd wear a kilt and he'd fiddle, but then his hair was dyed blonde, and he'd wear like the big Bono glasses and had like a pierced tongue. So it was like mixing a lot of things in a way that was cool.
Did everything, at least from a violin perspective, technically incorrect. So
really?
So you hold the violin on your left shoulder, left hand, he'd hold it on his right. Which, when you think about the dynamics of which the higher string, lower string, it completely flips it.
Yeah.
His texture, but he made it his own. And
that's why Jimi Hendrix, right? Jimi
Left-handed guitar player.
And flip it upside down and restrung it.
Right.
I've said this before. I had that conversation with people. There's two different ways I think you can approach education, and it sounds like you had the more traditional way where you're ultra disciplined. You learn the rules, and we kind of talked about that. And then once you've really deeply absorbed the rules, maybe you can start to branch off and break them. And the other way, I think, is to totally immerse yourself in that thing and not follow a form, but follow your love of it and your passion. And what ends up happening, I think, is you either have somebody that never figures it out, or you have somebody that understands it deeply because they've had to make all the mistakes. You know, learning to do things backwards and upside down, you really need to understand the dynamics of the sound that you're trying to produce to be able to do it. And I think you might have a deeper understanding of music because of it. You know, the classic car idea, if you try to fix your car with a wrench, you're going to understand not just your car, but every car better because of that direct connection. There's a guy named Josh Weiskin. Do you guys like chess at all?
I like chess. I like playing chess, but I'm not.
That's not following like the Russian grandmasters. There's a movie Searching for Bobby Fischer. Josh Weiskin is the kid in that movie.
Okay.
And so he grew up to become a jiu-jitsu black belt under Marcelo Garcia, and he wrote a book called The Art of Learning. And in it, he talks about being a chess prodigy, and it sounds very much like your experience, where as a child, you saw in the movie, he was heavily guided into this structured, strategic game. And then he talks about how he took those lessons and applied them to learning Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu and a few other things. It's really, I don't agree, it's a little hippy-dippy for me, but it's an interesting breakdown of how somebody thinks about enormously complex, enormously strategic activities and then actually
because that actually makes sense, because like chess, you got to think 10 moves ahead. So it'd be the same thing as with jiu-jitsu, right? You got to go, I'm thinking about this, but really you're looking for something 10 moves later.
This is something I did take from chess and apply it to jiu-jitsu. And I said, that's not actually how I'm thinking about either jiu-jitsu or chess. What I'm aware of is that any moment when we'll use chess as an example because it's a little bit easier, but if you froze that board for that moment, I know that there are a finite number of ways that you can react. There are a finite number of ways that you can react in the game. And if I know each of those potential reactions, I'm not necessarily 3 moves ahead, but I'm aware of everything that can happen in this move. And then if you branch that over to jiu-jitsu, when I throw up a triangle, I have the head and arm isolated. It's not that I'm thinking 3 moves ahead. I just know that there's 4 or 5 things that my opponent can do, and each one of them will end in a submission. He'll either get armbarred, he'll get omoplated, he'll get triangled. I'll sweep him, I'll take a mount and I'll triangle from there, or I'll take his back and choke him from there. And it's not. You could say that it's 3 moves ahead, but I'm not thinking in a way that's directing it to that point. I'm aware that there's 5 potential things that can happen, and I'm aware of how each one of those options leads to a submission, or in chess leads to check. And that's it's a harder thing to keep in your mind, but it's a far more flexible, strategic way to approach anything, fighting, jiu-jitsu, chess. It keeps your options open while still being strategic. And that's something that I really try to get across to my students day after day as a way to think about what we're doing.
Who'd you do your jiu-jitsu with?
Jeff Jocelyn got me into it. I was the Ronin, like I said, bounced around a lot. And coming from wrestling, I felt myself behind the 8 ball. I showed up at Jocelyn's with a chip on my shoulder as a national champion wrestler, thinking, look at these fucking 130-pound nerds. I'm going to take their lunch money when I teach them something about grappling. And then I got triangled 1,000 times. I got ankle locked 1,000 times. And I'm like, okay, I hate this. I hate losing. So I need to learn everything I can. So I started. I went to every seminar I could. Marcelo Garcia bought his books. Went to Eddie Bravo, bought his books. Stephen Kesting, who's a Canadian black belt, bought everything that he put out. And I learned well from reading. I absorb information well when I actually physically read the words. And so I read through all these instructionals, and it made a difference. And I'm probably a little bit. I probably have a bit of a natural gift when it comes to jiu-jitsu specifically, more than anything else in athletics. And then I was fortunate to connect with some really great people. PJ O'Sullivan, like I said, he's a black belt. Ricardo Amendolia, he's huge in the jiu-jitsu world. Great.
Is he out in Toronto area?
He's in Hamilton. He's at Pura, where I met Lyndon and Josh. Really good guy. He's one of the announcers for Flow Grappling.
Right.
He was actually announcing the last ADCC. So he's a great dude. I trained with Daniel Valverde, who is down in Florida, and he's a black belt that was willing to work with no gi athletes. And that's the thing. I've never put a gi on. I've put a gi on 3 times in my life. I don't like Japanese cosplay. I don't. If you wore a gi jacket in MMA, maybe I would see the value in it. But I wrestled for 15 years, and I never did judo. And I don't think that made me worse at wrestling. I find it a specious argument to suggest that you need a gi to be good at jiu-jitsu. I think you need a gi to be good at gi jiu-jitsu. But he was willing to work with me, and he's the one that actually promoted me up and gave me my black belt. And he was Amanda Nunez coach. Ricardo Lamas is one of his guys. So good MMA fighters with a solid wrestling, solid jiu-jitsu game. And I had the opportunity to train with a bunch of his guys. But a lot of what I would consider to be my game has been things that I've explored and built, on my own. And I've been enormously fortunate to have good grapplers that hold me accountable as a way to teach me, as opposed to maybe like breaking down techniques. And that's where I found some of the value with the guys that I've trained with.
Wow. See, you're more interesting than I thought. Well, because I never get to talk to you. And when I see you at a show, it's
of course.
It's in passing. It's real small talk. Hey, how's it going?
Well, you're running a show,
yeah,
and I'm focusing on an athlete, and neither you nor I, in that environment, are the type of people that are going to talk about ourselves. Like that night's not about you and I. It's about the show and about the fighters. So this would never ever come up in that environment.
Because you're somewhat intimidating. Like if I see you at a show and you're like, "Hey man, you happy? You sure you're happy?" Okay,
I know.
cool.
I work on trying to not have the cold face, because I know that looks wise I look a little bit angry, but I'm just focused in that environment. My relaxed face looks I got a resting bitch face, right? So I try to smile.
Like my wife, who's nice. She won't watch this. I'm just kidding.
That's a test. That's if
she's a test if she's watching. I know
you get shit on later. Yeah,
that's exactly.
Yeah, this is awesome, man. This is really cool.
Well, cool, man. Listen, we'll wrap this up.
Yeah,
we can wrap it up right now. I appreciate you coming in, bro. It really means a lot.
Me, man. This has been fucking
and let's do it again.
I'm down.
Yeah.
There's a bunch of other stuff that we can get into that we didn't really talk about. Like I enjoy this. It's fun.
Well, we'll do it again.
All right, cool.
100%. Amazing.
Awesome, brother.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Rory McDonell.